My name is James Holloway. I'm 42, and I serve as a systems operations officer in the U.S. Army. That morning started like any other, with the hum of the base servers in the background and my mug of coffee on the desk. But at exactly 8:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email notification, the subject line simple and sterile: personnel update. I clicked it without expecting much, only to feel my chest tighten as I read the first words. The email didn't say you're fired outright, but the implication was unmistakable, a formal nudge that my role had been terminated effective immediately. My hands went cold, and for a moment I stared at the screen, trying to reconcile 10 years of dedication with this single line of text. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, the kind that builds over long deployments and late nights in front of blinking monitors. My office, usually a quiet sanctuary of order and routine, suddenly felt alien, every corner glaring back at me like it had a story to tell that I wasn't ready to hear. Outside, the base was alive with normal activity. Soldiers walking with purpose, vehicles rumbling past. But inside, time had slowed to a crawl. My mind raced through the steps I had taken, the systems I managed, the countless nights ensuring every piece of hardware stayed online and secure. How could it all be dismissed with a single sterile note from HR? I sank back in my chair, coffee now forgotten, and tried to calm my breathing. This wasn't just about a job. It was about trust, responsibility, and the unspoken bond between those who maintain the foundation while others walk above it. I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to leave quietly. Every day in the military feels like a finely tuned machine, and I am one of the gears no one notices until something breaks. My responsibilities revolve around systems, operations, ensuring communications are seamless, networks are secure, and no single error jeopardizes missions or lives. I monitor countless servers, run diagnostics, and stay alert for anomalies that could have ripple effects far beyond the base walls. Even a small mistake can mean hours of troubleshooting or worse, failure of critical operations. Most days I move through this world quietly, a background force making sure everyone else can perform without interruption. At home, the story is different. My family sees me as someone who is always on duty, often unavailable for dinners, birthdays, or weekend trips. The sacrifices are invisible to them because they blend into the rhythm of my life, like the hum of the servers or the flicker of fluorescent lights on the base. My children know me, but often only in snapshots: a rushed breakfast, a weekend call, or a brief hug before I leave for another shift. My spouse understands the stakes, but sometimes the constant attention to detail, the unending vigilance, feels underappreciated. They do not always see that every decision I make protects more than hardware. It safeguards the people we care about. I have spent years mastering my craft, yet recognition is rare. Superior officers occasionally nod in acknowledgement, but those moments are fleeting, lost among orders, reports, and the endless demands of duty. The contrast between competence and invisibility is striking. I operate in a world where mistakes are catastrophic but successes are expected, and in my personal life, where dedication is assumed yet often overlooked. This duality has shaped me into someone patient, observant, and disciplined, yet a part of me longs for the acknowledgement that is so rarely given. It is this quiet tension between being seen and unseen that fuels both pride and frustration, and it is the backdrop for what would become the most unexpected day of my career. The moment I saw the official order posted in my inbox, I felt a cold weight settle over me that I could not shake. It was sterile, a few sentences of jargon and protocol, but the meaning was clear. My position had been terminated effective immediately. I had spent over a decade ensuring every communication line, server, and secure channel ran flawlessly, and now it was as if none of it mattered. Walking through the familiar corridors of the base felt surreal, each step heavier than the last. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, casting harsh shadows on the walls I had passed 1,000 times without noticing. Superiors and colleagues moved around me like ghosts, faces blank or politely distracted, and I realized they already knew before I did. My immediate supervisor approached. A thin smile plastered across his face and uttered a few words of protocol that barely masked the glee behind them. Every syllable felt like a punch, a reminder that all the meticulous work, the hours of vigilance, had been reduced to a single piece of paper. I reached my office and let the silence fill the room, noticing how small and sterile it felt now. The desk, once a place of command and control, seemed foreign, papers neatly stacked as if mocking me. I opened the secure terminal one last time, scanning for anything I might have missed, anything to change the course of this betrayal, but it was all locked down. My fingers lingered over the keyboard, a reflex born of years managing sensitive systems, but even that felt powerless now. Emotions collided within me. Shock, anger, disbelief. I had always followed orders, ensured readiness, and maintained the foundation that allowed others to shine. Yet here I was, dismissed without discussion, without acknowledgement of the countless nights I had spent preventing disaster. The feeling was more than humiliation. It was a piercing sense of injustice, a question of my own worth and place in a system I had dedicated my life to. As I collected my personal items, a photograph of my children, my worn notebook, the small mementos that marked my time at the base, I felt a strange clarity amid the chaos. This was not the end, merely a challenge I had to face on my own terms. The office door closed behind me with a finality that resonated in my chest, but I knew the story was far from over. Every skill, every lesson, every decision I had ever made would be tested in ways that no email or order could fully comprehend. I stepped into the corridor, taking a slow, measured breath, aware that the base continued its rhythm around me while my own world had shifted. The betrayal was real, yet it was also a spark, a signal that I had a choice, to react in anger or to act with precision. And deep down, I understood that the moment of humiliation might very well become the stage for vindication. I sat in my small office, the hum of the base servers a constant undercurrent, and took a deep breath to steady myself. Every instinct urged me to react immediately, to confront the decision that had stripped me of my position, but I knew that anger would only cloud judgment. Years of experience had taught me that patience and calculation were more powerful than any outburst. I began reviewing the systems I had built, the networks and protocols that ran silently in the background, often unnoticed. Every server, every communication channel, and every backup log had been carefully maintained, and now they were my only leverage. I traced connections, checked access points, and verified protocols, noting the potential weak spots that someone untrained might stumble upon. My mind ran through scenarios, predicting every possible intrusion and testing how each one would respond to anomalies. I wasn't just watching, I was anticipating, calculating, and preparing for every outcome before it happened. I set subtle traps, routines embedded in the systems that would detect unauthorized attempts and leave a digital footprint no one could erase. It was not malicious but precise, a methodical way to ensure that any tampering would be recorded and traced. I visualized each possible path an intruder might take, the blind spots, the shortcuts, and the points of failure, and made adjustments that would catch even the most cautious operator off guard. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not to act rashly, but to confirm that every line of code and every protocol was in place, ready to respond automatically if needed. As I worked, I reflected on the irony of my situation. I had been the person who kept the foundation solid, the invisible hand, making sure the machine ran flawlessly, yet my removal left the system technically intact but vulnerable to human error. I imagined the people in the chain of command, unaware of the true complexity of the environment I managed. They had judged my value through a narrow lens, ignoring the layers of oversight, precaution, and dedication that I had invested. It was a quiet frustration, but also a confirmation of why my approach had always been meticulous. Night fell outside, and the base grew quieter, the hum of machinery louder in the silence. I watched logs scroll on the screen, noting every alert, every heartbeat, and every token check, understanding exactly what each one represented. The anticipation was palpable, a slow-burning tension that reminded me of deployments, where hours could pass quietly before the sudden eruption of events. I allowed myself a small sip of coffee, the bitter taste grounding me in reality, and I prepared for the inevitable test of my systems. By the time the hours passed and the midnight shift began, I felt ready. Every precaution was in place, every monitor active, and every protocol primed. I leaned back slightly, observing the digital landscape I had created, knowing that when the moment came, the results would reveal both my skill and the oversight of those who had dismissed me. The calm before the storm was not empty. It was deliberate, a measured silence that would make the coming confrontation inevitable and undeniable. The first sign that something was about to change came when a subtle alert blinked across my monitor, the automated system I had set up detecting unauthorized access attempts. It was precise, clean, and deliberate, catching every move the intruder made, and I felt a small, silent satisfaction as the logs filled with evidence. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of servers around me suddenly feeling like allies, and knew that the game had shifted. Minutes later, a figure appeared in the doorway, tall, authoritative, and unmistakable in his uniform. General McAllister had arrived, his presence commanding immediate attention, and I could sense the weight of his scrutiny in the room. He scanned the monitors, the logs, and the alerts I had prepared, and I watched his expression shift from curiosity to understanding. It was a recognition that cut through the tension, a confirmation that the system had worked exactly as I intended and that the truth could no longer be denied. The intruder, caught mid-probe, had no chance to cover their tracks as the automated processes executed flawlessly. Every unauthorized command, every bypass attempt, was documented and time-stamped, leaving a trail that even the most confident operator could not erase. I felt the satisfaction of vindication rise slowly, tempered by the knowledge that my work, my attention to detail, had made this exposure possible. The general nodded toward me, a subtle gesture of approval, and I understood that my years of quiet diligence were finally being acknowledged. I glanced toward Lieutenant Daniels, the officer who had supported the decision to terminate my role, and caught the flash of panic in his eyes. He realized, as everyone now did, that his judgment had been flawed, that the system I had nurtured was far beyond his understanding or control. The room, once heavy with tension and uncertainty, shifted in tone as the general took charge, commanding respect and authority that left no room for excuses. Through the next few hours, the truth unfolded methodically, every piece of evidence corroborating the meticulous work I had done. The general directed his attention to each anomaly, following the chain of events I had anticipated, and the realization settled over the room that I had not only been competent but essential. My vindication was quiet yet absolute, the culmination of preparation, patience, and expertise that no single email or policy could diminish. When the general finally addressed the room, his words were direct, authoritative, and unambiguous. My role had been validated, my competence recognized, and the actions of those who had doubted me exposed in a manner that left no room for debate. I felt a mixture of relief, pride, and a quiet exhilaration, knowing that the meticulous systems I maintained had not only protected critical operations but had also safeguarded my integrity. The plot twist was complete, and in that moment the tension, the betrayal, and the injustice all resolved into a profound sense of accomplishment. The morning light poured into my office, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe without tension. General McAllister had recognized my efforts, not with praise alone, but by entrusting me with responsibilities that went beyond my previous role. It was a quiet affirmation of my value, an acknowledgement that the work I had done in silence had been indispensable, and it settled over me with a profound sense of relief. I walked through the office, observing colleagues now looking at me differently, a mixture of respect, surprise, and newfound understanding in their eyes. The same people who had moved past me without notice now recognized the depth of my contributions. It was not about vanity, but about validation. The confirmation that dedication and precision could not be ignored or erased, even by those who lacked foresight. Sitting back at my terminal, I reflected on the betrayal that had brought me to this point. The shock, the anger, and the feeling of being undervalued had been intense, but they had also sharpened my awareness and resolve. I realized that personal worth is not defined by the opinions of others, but by the integrity and diligence one maintains in every action. Every system secured, every protocol followed, and every precaution taken had a purpose, and that purpose had now been seen clearly by those in authority. My mind wandered to my family and the sacrifices they had endured alongside me. They had watched me devote time, energy, and focus to a role that often demanded invisibility. And they had been patient while I managed crises and navigated challenges quietly. The recognition I received at work was mirrored in a deeper understanding at home. A subtle but meaningful acknowledgement that our collective effort mattered and that resilience often carries its own reward. There was satisfaction in knowing that the betrayal had inadvertently highlighted my competence, turning a moment of injustice into a lesson for everyone involved. I felt a calm confidence, a steady assurance that the next challenges would be met with the same careful planning and quiet resolve. Looking around the office, observing the systems running smoothly, and knowing the intruder had been exposed without chaos, I felt a completeness that went beyond professional achievement. In those hours, I understood that every trial, every moment of doubt, had contributed to the clarity I now possessed. Recognition and responsibility were not just titles or tasks, they were the affirmation of a life spent upholding standards and protecting the integrity of everything entrusted to me. I sat back, letting the hum of servers fill the room, and knew that while betrayal can wound, preparation, patience, and competence will always leave a trail that the truth eventually follows. Looking back on the events, I realized that perseverance is more than enduring hardship. It is maintaining focus and integrity when recognition is absent. The moments of betrayal, doubt, and uncertainty taught me that true value is not always visible to those around you, but it remains present in every deliberate action you take. In the military, as in life, the work done quietly behind the scenes often upholds the structure that others depend on without realizing it. Integrity became my compass, guiding decisions even when no one was watching or acknowledging my efforts. The systems I maintained, the protocols I enforced, and the vigilance I practiced were not performed for accolades but because they were the right thing to do. That commitment, though invisible at first, ultimately defined the outcome and brought vindication in a way that anger or shortcuts never could. I also learned the importance of awareness and anticipation, understanding that preparation and foresight can turn moments of crisis into opportunities for validation and growth. The same principles apply beyond the base and the office. Careful planning, observation, and attention to detail protect family, community, and personal goals. Recognizing the small, often overlooked contributions of yourself and others builds a foundation of respect and trust that cannot be easily dismantled. Hope and resilience are inseparable from this process. The experience showed me that setbacks are temporary and that maintaining professionalism and discipline creates an inevitability where truth and competence are recognized. Those who act with dedication and responsibility will eventually find their work and character acknowledged, even if the path there is challenging or unseen. Ultimately, the story is about more than systems, authority, or a single act of betrayal. It is a reminder that perseverance, integrity, and quiet competence are enduring forces that shape outcomes and build character. The lessons extend to anyone facing challenges, where effort seems unappreciated, proving that maintaining standards and trustworthiness is its own reward. When moments of recognition finally arrive, they carry the weight of experience, preparation, and the unwavering resolve to do what is right, inspiring both personal fulfillment and lasting impact. As I reflect on everything that happened, I want to share one simple truth. Stand firm in your principles and recognize the value of your own contribution. There will be times when your efforts go unnoticed or are dismissed, but that does not diminish their importance. The work you do, the dedication you bring, and the integrity you maintain are what define your character and shape your future. I encourage you to take a moment and think about your own experiences where perseverance, preparation, or quiet competence made a difference. Share your story in the comments, because your perspective may inspire someone else to stay steadfast when facing challenges. If this story resonated with you, consider liking the video and subscribing for more content that highlights real-life lessons, unexpected challenges, and the power of resilience. Remember that recognition often comes in unexpected ways, and the measure of your work is not always immediate praise but the lasting impact of doing what is right. Trust in your skills, remain patient, and act with integrity, because those qualities will carry you through moments of doubt and lead to meaningful acknowledgement. Your dedication matters, your effort counts, and your story is worth telling.